Welcome to the first episode of A Mental Health Break with Vincent A. Lanci. I'm excited to launch this podcast for you all. I'm Vincent Lanci, speaker and author of the book Left for Dead, A Story of Redemption. When I was 21 years old, I was the victim of a hit-and-run accident while walking home from a friend's birthday. After coming out of a coma and suffering from a traumatic brain injury, or you may know of as a TBI, I soon realized that it was time to put my mental health on a very, very high pedestal. Are you looking to improve the quality of your mental health or just learn a little more? If so, look no further. This is the perfect podcast for all things mental health. I want to start this series by congratulating you for making your mental health a priority. For the very first episode, I'm happy to introduce my guest, Dr. Denise McDermott, also known as Dr. Denise. We actually met because I sent her a book once my author copies arrived in hopes to make a difference together, and here we are. She is one of the biggest names in the mental health world, and without further delay, here's my guest today, Dr. Denise McDermott.
Oh, Vince, thank you so much for having me. And I also just want to let you know, I am so inspired by you. Thank you for sharing your story, inspiring all of us, and getting new conversations going.
Denise, thank you so much again for being my first guest. So now, before we get it going, will you please give my guests, my listeners, your story and a little bit about yourself before we hop into the big six?
Oh, okay. Well, I really am so much more interested in you, but thank you for asking. My story, I don't know what you want to know. I've got so many stories. What story would you like?
Something to give our listeners just a little background, a little preview before we get into our questions.
Okay, fantastic. So I am a mother, a healer, a doctor, and I've been in practice as an adult and child psychiatrist since 2001, but I'm so passionate about changing the way we think, talk, and act about all things to do with mental health, the words we choose, the way we describe our inner world to people. I think we're living at such an exciting time because people are realizing that their inner world, or if you want to say your mindscape, or your inner peace, or your happiness, has been really kind of put to side. And I think society is realizing that we need to put that at the forefront, that our mental health is a top priority. So, a little bit of background: 4 years ago, I decided to take that leap like you're doing and say, we've got to get these discussions going. And with humility and grace, I built a following on the internet, but I've been also to India. I've spoken at the Dalai Lama's Body Mind Life Conference on nurturing mental health.
So
Am
amazing.
about I have a podcast, I have a book, I have exciting things, but it's really not about the accolades. It's about meeting people like you.
Oh,
So
well
to
said.
me, like just seeing you, your smile, and I might end up having tears. If I have tears, everyone, it's because I have like a lot of emotions that are like really powerful. I'm like really proud to be here with you, and your
Oh,
story
thank you
is
so
so
much.
inspiring.
Thank you so much, guys. And we'll get into all of that in depth, what you talked about briefly when we get to our questions. But Denise, something I'm going to do each week here on A Mental Health Break with Vincent A. Lanci is to share a mental health story of someone who is famous, because I want to let you know, our listeners, that you are not alone. You are a regular person, whether you are famed or not. We're all battling issues together. I want you to understand that even though someone looks healthy from the outside, they may not be on the inside too. So, Denise, I was reading this article on Good Morning America, and there was a write-up on Selena Gomez, and I think it can resonate with a lot of our listeners. And I admire her very much because of all she's been through, and I got to really learn a little bit more about her. Even after suffering from anxiety, pain, and fear, and undergoing a successful kidney operation, she maintained one constant, and that's being a wonderful role model for kids. I'd like to add a powerful quote that she shared with Good Morning America in relation to her award she received at the McLean Hospital's annual dinner for her mental health advocacy work. She said she was terrified because the veil was lifted after each appointment for her medical appointments, but she finally had the knowledge of why she suffered from these depressions and anxieties for many years, and she said she never had that awareness or answers about that condition. So that's something that I'm really trying to use this podcast for, as an outlet for people to just that, learn about their conditions. She has many accomplishments, like you said. They're not important. It's about what she's doing, which is so remarkable. She's reached number one in the top Billboard 200 with her solo albums twice, 5 top 10 hits, all solo, and she's one of the more famous stars from the Disney Channel. Denise, did you know anything about her story, or is this a little new to you?
Well, you sent it to me, but I'm really, Selena, I was gonna just look up her song. She just released a new song, right?
I'm sure she's very,
No,
very.
no, we should actually really, she just released something and it's really powerful. And so, what I love about Selena and other celebrities is when you use your platform, but also the gifts. I believe in a greater energy, if you want to say universe or God. So I think what Selena brings to the table is what I like to say part of mental health and wellness is an integration. And when we integrate all the gifts that God or power, and if you don't believe in God, that's okay, your higher self.
Uh-huh.
I feel like Selena is a champion of showing us, I believe, compassion in action, healing in action. And I think her songs, her lyrics, her vulnerability, her transparency gives people permission to talk about things that could be very vulnerable. So I applaud her, and I'm glad that we brought her up.
Yeah, likewise. It's such a remarkable story, and she's such a story of perseverance and resilience, which is what we all try to be. But thank you for that, Denise. Now we're going to get into the main event. Each week, listeners, my guests and I will go over a series of 6 questions. My goal is to feature many valuable guests on this podcast, including people talking about their mental health, influencers, and doctors. In this case, we get an influencer and a doctor, so this is a very value-filled episode for you. By doing this, it will allow me to deliver as much value to you as possible. So number one, Denise, many would agree that the more common or talked about types of mental illnesses are mood disorders, anxiety disorders, and schizophrenia disorders. Which areas do you come across the most in your practice?
Well, so a couple things. People that come to see me know that I'm a champion of words. And as a Western medicine trained doctor who is holistic and has an understanding of the universe that's also very Eastern, I value science and even the word disorders that you just said out loud or mental illness. I like to validate people when they come to see me. They often have anxiety or depression. Some of the most common things I see in my practice where I am are topics of anxiety, depression, ADHD, bipolar, normal adjustments. But I think the biggest part of healing is actually reframing, like you're Vince or I'm Denise, and like knowing your emotional state. So one of the biggest gifts I have is not just the diagnoses or helping someone if they have depression or anxiety, but having them have a new inner self-talk about how to think about themselves so they don't think of themselves as disordered. It doesn't mean you don't feel disordered when you're having anxiety, depression, or cognitive decline. However, those words aren't very healing. So I quickly take people in a cognitive path of almost recreating their own story so that they can be their own best healer.
I love that. Yeah, it's scary when, we don't really know what's going on, but thanks to people like you, we're able to work with our issues and make them less of a liability and more of a strength and training, I like to call it. So you
Absolutely.
touched on this for a quick second, which didn't give too much away for number two, which is good for our listeners. When did you first decide that a career relating to mental health was the right career for you? You mentioned the time frame, but can we maybe get a little details on the situation? When you said, hey,
Yeah.
it's time, we're going to make a difference here, and this is how we're going to do it.
You want to know the part where I did the influencer or when I decided to be a psychiatrist?
Let's touch on both. They're both very
Okay.
important.
So when I was in medical school, we go through rotations when you're a third year medical student. And every single rotation, whether it was internal medicine, surgery, ER, it seems as though I was able to connect with people more on a soul level and go deeper with questions. So one example would be a little girl who came in with a stomach upset and didn't want to go to school that day. She was new from Africa. She was being bullied by her peers. Everyone thought it was just stomach upset. I went in there and I found out that she had just attempted suicide. And so after 3 other people went in the room, no, she didn't feel comfortable. So I felt very comfortable with this young girl. And she was a great student. I actually visited her outside of the hospital. I got her to open up and talk about her inner world. And so throughout my rotations in medical school, it was just like following your natural gift. So I listened to the inner voice. And then when I was younger, even before I went to medical school, there was this in Chicago. I grew up in the Chicago area, everyone. And there was this Ann Landers, like this famous news, Ann Landers. And my mom and dad used to call me like their little Ann Landers because everyone would call me with their issues, or so and so likes me or so and so doesn't like me. So at a very young age, it was just my natural gift. And then I just listened to that, and that just evolved. And I had stigma even with now there's like stigma of talking about mental health. Even at that time in the late 90s, deciding to go into psychiatry, I got some slack from my cohorts. They were like, "What?" Like I was selling out. Like you're such a top student. Psychiatry was looked at as almost like the weaker thing in medicine, like the soft medicine.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
so I was proud of myself. And I think I know from reading your book, you have strong work ethic and values, and you played sports. And I love your quote. I just want to like read it.
Oh, thank you.
Tell me I can't and I will.
Yes, that's kind
So
of my little
tell me I can't and
motto.
I will. So
Yeah.
if people are sort of questioning like my thoughts, and I'm like strong conviction, like I want to be a psychiatrist, I want to do mental health. I know I got an A on surgery, but this is what I'm going to follow my passion. And I think that's actually part of mental health is listening to our own inner voice and making sure we find our own happiness. I think a lot of times people don't do that. And I think that was part of my own success as a
Yeah.
person, as a mother, and as a doctor. And I can talk about my influencing part, but I want to give you a chance to talk.
No, it's okay. You're giving us a lot of value. I appreciate that. You know, something similar with me, I had this transformative incident where I was in school for my finance degree and obviously later did my MBA, but I always thought I want that title, you know, the title of I'm a senior VP at this whatever in this bank, top office, making big contract. But I'm learning, you know, if I just follow my passion, you hear it a lot, but it's tough to resonate with until you actually experience it. Or if you like what you do, you're never working a day in your life. And now that this book has come out and I'm launching these podcast series, I find myself, you know, 2 a.m. when I'm waking up before I teach English online, working and then working throughout the day. And now it's dinner time. It's 12, 13, 14 hours. I'm just bettering myself, bettering my brand, but more importantly, making a difference. And that's what I wasn't able to do in a full-time job because I didn't have the time to allocate myself to making a difference. So let's just touch about your influencer because I know there's a lot of people out there who want to work their way up and be a mental health influencer, share their stories to impact others positively. What was that moment for you where you said, it's time to do it, more than just a practice?
Well, it's such a very multi-dimensional long answer. So a couple of things. Number one, I would say my father is probably one of my biggest heroes because when I was 11, he almost died of alcoholism. And I saw him not only go to AA meetings, and I went to some of those ones for the children to go, the children of the alcoholics, but I saw my father fight his addiction. And I saw him recommit to himself. He always believed in a higher power. And so I think there was a lot of shame, at that time in the 80s about substance. People didn't go around talking about, oh, I'm an alcoholic or I have depression. It just wasn't the way it was. And so I think that I was growing up at a time where there was a lot of shame around alcoholism, but I really I like innately just was so proud of him healing. So I think my father getting sober was instrumental, not only to me having like sort of a real life example of someone who could shift their mental health, right? And I think my mom and I've talked, he's since passed. We think he probably had untreated ADHD and some mood issues. And that's what I often see. People with addiction are often self-medicating. And so
Yeah.
I feel like I bring that to the table naturally, that I take the shame away about topics. And I think that childhood experience was very influential. And then I also think my sister and other people that I love, my uncle, my whole family is high achievers, but people have had different levels of anxiety or mood. And then my own son, I don't want to make it a diagnostic thing,
Yeah.
actually, but my own son is very active. And his birth mom, I adopted him at birth. So I guess I'm like living it, walking it, doing it, right? I'm living it at home, I'm living it in my office, and I think that after, with humility, all the hours I have of training now for not training, doing it. I've been on the front lines. I've helped people to not kill themselves. I had someone just yesterday. I have people that are coming off heroin. So I thought it would be really, really important to take the knowledge, wisdom, and humility that I have from what I do and like I have an ability to talk about things in ways that actually just are unique. And I thought it's time. And so I initially had a publicist, but then I realized I didn't necessarily want a go-between, like because it took the flow of my energy.
I
So
agree.
I'm really hands-on. In fact, even today, you're talking about being passionate.
Hmm.
I sent an email to you. Today's supposed to be my own like day of relaxation. I just launched a new show. And then all of a
Yeah.
sudden Vince is like, "Are we doing a show?" And I'm like, "Oh my God. Okay, let's do it." Because
Yeah.
I was so excited and like I just was like I'm on it. I'm like let's talk, let's have these discussions. So it's just like you said, I'm like passionate about it. If I like my intentions over time, I did some filming, would be to have a show that reaches way more people than I am now, like millions.
Hmm.
And that's going to eventually happen, but it's because of people like you and all of us working together and having new discussions. So it's kind of been inspired by many. There's even way more stories to say what
Yeah.
inspired me, but I think that's a good start.
Yeah. You're a true, you know, role model in the field, someone who's passionate day in, day out, and brings their work home with them because you truly love what you do. And I admire that very much. Let's move to number three. What advice can you give to your listeners as potential early signs that they may be developing some form of mental illness?
Well, I think what's really important, I like to think in terms of mental wellness instead of illness. And I think number one, I'd love to have these discussions integrated into our preschools, into our elementary schools. They're starting to happen where I live. So, what I would tell people is, and at a very young age, I would hope that parents and teachers and coaches, that we, not only as children, teens, and adults, we could focus on the idea of what is my happiness? What is my best version of myself? So when we are thriving, like you said, when you have more time to do the things you love, I mean, I'm at my A game, I'm going to go swim or go to the gym. My mental wellness is if I'm going on some social events, I'm knocking on the park at work, I'm doing stuff with my son, and I'm like engaged and motivated and wanting to do it. Now, there's the normal days where you just don't have the energy, but from a mental health standpoint, you have to know your own baseline. Some people are more outgoing than others to begin with, so you have to take a mental health foundation baseline. And then the signs for each person would be maybe if someone isn't as interested in something, they might be anxious in social situations. They might realize that they at one point were able to focus a lot, now they're not able to. Or let's say someone's having sleep disturbance or their appetite changes. There's this term that's non-medical that I use. A lot of people come to me and they've been suffering for a while, but they're high achievers. So even if they're having sadness, it's almost like they don't even realize it. It's almost like 2 years later, you're like, whoa, I was having a low grade depression. And like the term I use when people come in is like, do you feel
Hmm.
eh? Like you're not as engaged, not as happy, not as connected. And sometimes it takes months to realize, wow, I was going through a low grade depression. And so I think it's when you're going away from your own baseline. And I'm gonna make this real because I think people want to hear real and not just all
Oh,
the technical stuff.
absolutely,
In
absolutely.
February, I was dealing with I won a lawsuit and the person like the money just got hidden or disappeared and I started warning other women. It's I just launched a show today called Rocking a Betrayal. And in February, when I started going through the subpoenaed bank records and started warning other women that were defrauded, like myself, I was probably at my saddest I've ever been. I mean, I've gone through infertility, I've gone through infidelity, but there was something about the nature of what this person was doing to other people that made me so sad. And my own mom's like, Denise, do you think you need to go on antidepressants? Do
Hmm.
you need to go to therapy? And I said, you know what, mom? In 2 months, if I don't get back to my baseline, I will go seek higher level of care. I already have like friends and people, and I work out 6 days a week. I do
Yeah,
shows, but I thought it was a normal level of sadness when you're going through like the bank records and you're seeing all this evil. And I'm an empath. And
yeah,
so, what I was going to say is, I think the decision for someone to realize, am I feeling anxious? Am I feeling sad? Am I as productive as usual? You need to kind of look at it and give yourself time to rest. It's okay. People don't do enough mental wellness days. They have to make it like an illness or a disorder. And I
you're
think
very right about that.
prevention's key. And so what I did, this is me just trying to be a good model, is I just swam more. I saw 30% less patients. Like today is normally like one of my lioness days where I have my spa robe on and my hair is like wild. Like when you were like, can you jump on a call and make sure I can comb my hair? So like today is like a Dr. Denise influencer. I'm gonna go hit the gym. I'm probably gonna go out dancing tonight.
Love it. Love
And
it.
so like to answer your question, I think for someone that's deciding, am I suffering with anxiety? Am I suffering with depression? Is my memory changing? You have to look at your own baseline and ask yourself, am I still having joy? Do I have
Mm,
the energy to get things done? And then I believe in a holistic plan. So you want to make sure your nutrition's good. You want to do an anti-inflammation diet. You want to hit cardio. You want to get cardio 150 minutes. You got to get your weight training in there. You need to use exercise as mind medicine. That shouldn't be like, oh, I worked out because I just ate too much turkey. It
mm.
needs to be like, you know what I mean? It needs to be like an
It's
integrated.
my therapeutic practice for me going to the gym. It's my morning mind release. So thank you.
Right?
I love the way you put that with your baseline, and we're going to revisit that at the end of the show because I really do like that. So question number 4 out of 6, Denise. If you could only pick three and just three, what are the three most important things our listeners can do on a daily basis to improve their mental health? You know, you touched on a holistic approach. Maybe some of those things were overlap here. But what are
Can it
three
be
things
more
our
than
listeners?
three?
Well, the three
Hard
most
for me, the
important.
doctor.
There's quick things so that our
Okay,
listeners
the
walk
most
away.
important thing to starting our day, I believe, is getting your mind in the right space to face the day. So, number one, be aware. And how can you be aware? By being grateful.
Love it.
Okay, so that's number one. Then I'm going to go with number two is practicing self love.
Love that
When
too.
we have self love and we're being our own best friend, we are reaching our highest happiness, our highest success. And it's very important that we honor ourselves because not school isn't for everyone. Certain jobs aren't for everyone. Don't compare yourself. Have your self-love and pay attention to the things that you do that give you the most joy and do more of them. Number three, altruism. Altruism. Once we're aware, we're having our self love, it's time to realize that when individuals thrive, we all thrive. And Darwin kind of had his claim to fame for being like survival of the fittest, but my understanding from many of the integrative pioneers and spiritual leaders, and just my own belief, is Darwin wanted his second book, Descent of Man, to be really what his claim of fame was, that the way that humankind was going to thrive is when there's cooperation and altruism. So when we are being of service and loving ourselves, it's first awareness, self-love, then it builds. It's a Venn diagram. When we're thriving, others thrive, and it's a vibrational frequency. So like you're doing like exactly what you should do. You have a message. You fought something. You were aware. You fought for your mental health, Vince. You have self-love. You nailed it. You went to undergrad, graduate school, and now you want to give back. And
Yes.
when we give back, we are also nurturing our souls. And so those are the three things: awareness, self-love, and altruism. And there's so much more I could fill in, but those would be the things that I say are the big part of nurturing one's mental health.
I really appreciate that. And by you giving three things our listeners can narrow down, those are three things they can definitely attack on a daily basis. But number 5, question 5, we just touched on a couple short-term initiatives. If you could pick two a little longer-term commitments, maybe not years or could be years, depending on what you're thinking, what are two long-term initiatives our listeners can take to create a more positive mental headspace?
That our listeners could take to do.
Yeah, so we just talked
Okay.
to some shorter ones.
Okay, so no, the long game is number one would be finding what is my ideal day. Write down what your ideal day is and start doing more of it each day. Okay, so if you have your ideal day, let flesh this out of
Yeah.
I want to work out this much, I want to be with my friends, I want to do this. When you start doing like small steps every day, then number two would be write down your big goals. Like I want to start a company, or I'm going to write a book, or I'm going to do this. But you have to go to step back to step one, and you have to make sure that you have an infrastructure put into place with good time management, good mental health, so that you can actually achieve those goals.
I love the way you're putting this because it's simplified and it's very attainable for everybody to attack. Thank you, Denise. And number 6, You're definitely touched on it a little bit, but what are some ways you plan on raising awareness for importance of the mental health in the near future? Maybe now we can touch on what you just rolled out today.
Oh gosh, we can touch on a lot. So
I,
number one,
this is a good
um,
question for
with
you.
humility and gratitude, I don't know how we're going to be working together, but my intention, first of all, I practice mindfulness and being in the now. That's crucial for the listeners because we might say we have a plan, but things change. We have to pay attention to our inner voice. So my biggest thing is changing the way we think, talk, and act about mental health, but we need to get everyone talking about it. And so, what I've been fortunate enough to do by meeting people like you, I met this amazing person named Darnell Stokes. He's over in China. He's a power forward. I've now known him. I did a podcast with him on giving it back, giving it forward. Like, oh, pay it forward. You can look up my podcast, Dr. Denise Show. Darnell and I did a show 2 years ago. We filmed last year in Colorado to see if we had a great vibe. And now in September, we did a sizzle reel. So we have a show called Keep It Real that we're going to see if we can pitch. We're either going to do podcast, television, documentary. So that's on the horizon.
Do it all.
Yeah. And then I had that fraud happen to me because of being an influencer. I had
Yeah.
someone profile me, find me, betray me, and also other people. So I decided to take that betrayal and turn it into a healing. One of my biggest passions, instead of lead by example, I want to heal by example.
I
So I'm
love
going to be more vulnerable. I'm going to throw it down. I'm not going to be afraid. And so I just launched a carve out series in my Dr. Denise show called Rocking a Betrayal. And it's going to show people with tips, tools, and action items how to heal. The society that we live in right now is fear-based. You turn on the news, you turn on Twitter, someone's doing something. We don't have mechanisms in place to show people how to heal. So my intention through my Dr. Denise show, projects with Keep It Real, I'm about to do a workshop in Malibu called Be Your Best Self for Women in Power. I've done co-produced a documentary on meditation and psychiatry. So what I'm planning on doing, Vince, is exactly what you said with those two steps.
Yes.
My framework of my day, and then my long-term goals. And like even talking to you today, that's an example. Like I didn't know we were going to do this today, but look at, like I had the time and I'm like, yes. And so now I get to meet you and who knows what we'll be doing together. This is how it works.
I can't even imagine the great things that we're going to accomplish together. You know, we have such a good professional chemistry, and we're gonna do great things together. Denise, thank you so much for joining me today. I know our listeners are definitely going to see a lot of value in our episode. I really enjoyed how you talked about the baseline. I think that was a great way to put it, and a lot of people can understand that. And I am very grateful. Oh, go ahead.
I wanted to make sure when you said the baseline, I want to introduce to everyone a very powerful word that I was asked to actually more formalize.
Please,
This has
please.
to do with the way we change the way we think, talk, and act about mental health. And I have an episode called Embrace Your Neurostyle. In the clinical world, there's neurotypical, neurodiverse. I thought, well, we all have a style. You don't have to have a diagnosis. And so the word neurostyle is that we all process and perceive information in our own unique way. Again, we all process and perceive information in our own unique way. And so every activity I do is going to be about words that actually make you feel like you're having the flight into health. So you can say my style, my this. You don't have to make it like this doomsday, like dun da da da, my cognitive decline. I mean, it doesn't mean you don't talk about that sometimes, but you don't have to go around saying my major depression or my bipolar. And by the way, I'm not saying if you want to talk about it, please do. But
Yeah.
why not just make it like, hey, I'm feeling rageful right now, or I am about to smack someone. I don't think I should meet you for coffee, or just something like fun. Like, how do you get to know people in a way that's like healthy and more connected that makes you closer? And so, as we're finishing up this episode, I want to say I'm passionate about words and using new words to talk about difficult topics and also to have fun. Words are fun.
Oh, I mean, I think as the world is constantly changing and technology, everything's innovating, so is mental health, and there's no reason it can't evolve the way as you're saying. So, Denise, we touched on a few things that we didn't get to touch on today, but I always introduce the last word. This is something I do on my other podcast, what it's really like to be an entrepreneur too, because I really want our listeners to get to know my guests. They really are going to get to know you well after your valuable episode today. But is there one more thing we didn't get to touch on today, Denise?
Yes, I think the biggest message I would say to everyone is that if you are going in your suffering in any way, whether it's mental health, whether you have a physical ailment, whether you've had fraud, whether you've lost your job, whether it's the holidays, I think going into the suffering, and this means allowing yourself to have all your feelings and looking at them. When we go into the crisis, when we go into the suffering, in the world, I could geek out right now, but it's a quantum universe. We have the most energy for change when we're going through a tough time. So remember, it might seem like you're suffering or sad, but if you can use the energy of that and you can shift it into neutrality and you can do great things with it. So the biggest take home point is remember, we all suffer. And that's why I'm going to give messages that are real, and I'm going to be transparent and vulnerable because that's what the world needs right now. We need to show each other that it's okay that we all suffer, but we can be there for one another.
I love the way you put that. Thank you so much, Denise. Can you go ahead, and we touched on a little bit of your website, social media earlier, what you have going on. Can you please share that for our listeners so they can follow your journey and learn so much more from you?
Thank you. Yeah, so my website is drDenisemd.com, DRDENISEMD.com. And on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn, I'm at Dr. Denise MD. And I'm in Southern Cal.
Yeah, thank you so much. And guys, that's DeniseMD.com for her website. And on Twitter, Facebook, IG, and LinkedIn, Dr. Denise MD. You can always follow our show at a mental health break and on Instagram and on Twitter at Podcast by Lanci. Of course, my handles are at Vincent A. Lanci on all social media and YouTube. If you like today's episode, please continue listening and rate a mental health break with Vincent A. Lanci 5 stars. I truly do work really hard to find value delivering guests for you on each episode. Thank you so much for joining us today, and I'll see you on the next episode of A Mental Health Break with Vincent A. Lanci. Denise, thank you so much. I think that went great.
Yeah, I do too. Oh my God, I love your smile. Can I tell you something? Are we still recording? You're gonna cut it off.
I'm going to chop it up before I
Okay.
send it out. Yeah.
I just want to say that besides my Western understanding of the world, I just want to say that your soul, you are a light worker.
I
Your
appreciate it.
smile, your energy, your love. I'm actually gonna have like tears of gratitude. I just want to thank you for being you.
Oh, I can't thank you enough. You know, you have to think of yourself maybe in the beginning of your career when you're taking these shots, trying to reach the big dogs, you know, getting the top influencers. And you did answer me. You know, I didn't reach out to that many, to be honest, because you know how busy I am with all these things. But I took my shot with you, and I'm very thankful. You know, part of my career in the beginning of speaking was I was monetizing it quickly and a lot, but then it dried up. So I needed to find new ways to try to sustain this as a career. So
Hmm.
I'm happy, you know, with the book and now a few podcasts. Hopefully, I can find ways to monetize my passion more frequently. And, you know, I really can't wait to make a difference with you when you're ready to have me on your podcast and whatever you need from me. I sent you back my, I was having trouble getting it to save. I don't know
Okay,
why.
no problem. You're perfect.
Yeah, and I'm ready to make a difference with you whenever you shall need me. Call. On my website, I kind of just copy and pasted your bio on your website if you want to
Perfect.
check it out to make sure it looks okay. Whenever on
Maybe
my
can you send me a link to your website on the
yeah,
text?
I'll
Perfect.
send it right now. Yeah.
'Cause okay, so a couple things. One, Kathleen will get your book and then we'll schedule a podcast, whatever timing that is. She's got kids, she's busy, she's great. And then after that, I've got a workshop I'm doing in January, but one of the big intentions I have a huge following now and I've done the work. I want to start doing workshops. But we could do Zoom interviews. We'll figure it out. But I trust
Yeah, I would
my
love to
higher
work with you.
power.
I'd love to
I
work with
trust my higher power that everything's in divine order. I just have to keep chipping away.
you. Yeah, and I apologize to get the confusion with the time again. I saw
Problem.
you said between 10 and 11:30, so that's why I was like, all right, how's 10:30? But then I didn't hear from you,
Oh,
so I was just like, I'll
yeah,
sit
yeah.
around. I
No,
figured
I
you were
had a
busy to
patient that was,
start.
I'm gonna be honest with you, I had a patient that was suicidal yesterday, and then I have someone that I'm seeing that's going through something. He's a warrior, he's like a gladiator, and I was up for 5 hours like channeling. Besides my Western medicine, I have other accesses of healing, and so I apologize I didn't look at my email.
No, it's okay. I just saw text. You know, at this time of the day, I'm hitting, 12 hours or so. So I
Great.
was like, do I
Fun.
make a coffee? Do I just nap? Maybe she got busy. I don't know.
I'm so
But
glad
yeah,
you
my
are.
goal is I guess probably the first Monday in November. I want to put this out. If you wouldn't mind, just
What first Monday in when? January?
November. November.
It's
Oh no,
November.
January. January. Yes. See.
Okay. Yeah. No, that's okay. When you do it, let me know if there's like because then I'll put it on my website.
Yeah, I was gonna say,
I don't
please
know if
go.
you're doing a blog post, like if you're gonna write something up. Why
Yes,
don't
I
we, yeah, if you are, then I can put your like a picture of the podcast and then we can link it with your article and I can write like a blurb. So then when we get closer to the time, let me know and I'll put it on my website.
thank you so much. I'm gonna take a note of that picker podcast and write up for Dr. Denise for her website. Yeah, thank you so much for her joining me again. I think it went well. I think it
I
went
do
really
too.
good
I
for a
think it
bunch
went
of
really well.
Skype
Go
noobs.
Vince, go Vince, your first
Yeah,
podcast with mental health. Okay, okay.
yeah.
Anyways, it's
I
so
think it
nice to
went
see you
great.
and meet you.
Likewise, and please let me know when the next step is with you. I'm anxiously waiting to work with you.
Okay, sounds
Thank
great.
you,
Okay, have
Denise.
a beautiful weekend. Thank
Bye.
you.